We're going to continue from yesterday with using augmented matrices to represent a system and then also to solve using row operations. So hopefully you all remember all the things that we were talking about yesterday, but just to review, just in case you forgot, the coefficients of the variables are what gets put into the matrix. It's augmented because it has this extra bar to represent the equals, and then the coefficients of the variables get put in here. Now, we're going to take a look at these row operations in order to solve the system. And in order to do that, we started yesterday, and I didn't really get anywhere with it, so it's pretty much like we're starting from scratch. So we have this. The way that I'm going to work this is I'll start by telling you what we're going to do, and at the end you're going to understand why we did that. Because for right now, it's going to be like, wait a minute, why did we do that? I'll tell you right now, we're working towards putting the equation into something called Echelon form, which is a special form of an augmented matrix that makes it very easy to solve for a variable. So remember in the rules for the matrices that you have in front of you, or you should have in front of you if you have your notes out, we said we can really multiply or divide any row by anything, but then you can also combine the rows. So what I want to do first is I'm going to take -2 times row 1, and I'm going to add it to row 2, and so that's going to be row 2. Now, if this gets away from you at all, since it's being recorded, that's really convenient because you're going to be able to go back and watch again if you need to go through it. So -2 times row 1 plus row 2. Question? Yes?
Why is it times -2?
Well, it's times -2 because what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to get a 0 in this spot. And as you go through, you'll see why I'm trying to get a 0 in this spot. Because if I take -2 times -1, I get -2. And I add it to 2, and that gives me how much? Gives me 0. So to say that again, -2 times the number in row 1 plus the number in row 2 gives me a 0 to go right here. Let's do this for the next one. We're doing this times the whole row. So -2 times -3 gives us +6. -2 times -3 gives +6, plus 1 gives 7. -2 times 1 gives -2. -2 plus -5 is, somebody said -7. Okay, so we've multiplied this row times -2 and added it to this row. Now for now you're like, okay, so she wanted to get a 0 here, but why? That'll become evident pretty soon if I do this right. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I get a 1 in this spot. Okay, what I'm looking for in these is diagonal 1s this way and a 0 here. Yes. -7 because -2 times -1. -2 times +1 is -2. -2 plus -5 is -7. Because -2 times row 1 plus what's in row 2. But do that. Make sure that you're checking up on me so that I'm not making any mistakes, because once you make a mistake, you're kind of sunk. So what I want to do in order to get a 1 right here is I'm going to take row 2 and I'm going to divide it by 7. Because when I divide by 7, I'm going to end up with 0. I have not lost my 0 here because 0 here is important. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And negative 7 divided by 7 is negative 1. All right, now this form of the equation, this form of the matrix that we have is called echelon form. Echelon form. And what echelon form really means is that you've got a 0, or if you had a bigger matrix, you'd have zeros all down in the corner, but then you'd have ones going diagonally, and that's echelon form. And why is echelon form great? Well, echelon form helps you to solve for a specific variable. So remember up here, this matrix actually represented 1x minus 3y equals 1. And this one represented 2x plus 1y equals negative 5. What does the bottom row here represent? 0, 0 times x. So 0x plus 1y equals negative 1. 0x plus 1y equals negative 1. So here we're given your y value. Okay? This one still represents x minus 3y equals 1. So then you can take your negative 1 and plug it in and have very little work to do at the end. So this is really what the whole point of putting into echelon form is, so that you have something that's not too difficult as far as solving. So we get negative 2. So our answer would be negative 2, negative 1. And yes, I know that for me, if I was really wanting to solve this most efficiently, I would just use elimination, quite honestly. But since we're learning a new skill, we'll pick one that's kind of easy to start with. Yes, Jason. Say again? Where we get the negative 1 from. The negative 1 comes from 0x plus 1y equals negative 1 when we have this. Remember, when we made the original, this represents an equal sign. These are the x coefficients, these are the y coefficients, and then this is what it equals. So 0x plus 1y equals negative 1. Okay? Phoenix?
It was the same question.
Same question? Okay. And hopefully right now our 2 soccer guys are just celebrating a victory, because by the time they get around to watching it, it might be after. But so we love you, soccer guys, and are hoping the best for you. And we're praying the best for you. That makes it even better. That's good. All right. So we good? All right. Let's take a look. Take a look here. Okay, we're going to do this again. Okay. We're going to do this again. This row operations thing. Just so that you're used to seeing it. So we want to set up our matrix to start with, our augmented matrix. So what numbers go across here for our augmented matrix? 3, 4, 13. And you should have on your paper, you should have this one ahead. So, and okay, now this one's going to get a little bit weird because we're going to have fractions to deal with, but we're all going to live. So, taking a look at this. 3, 4, 13, 2, negative 3, 14. Please watch really carefully, because if we make a mistake, we're going to reap some bad consequences later on. Now, I said we're supposed to get 1s going down this way and a 0 here. If we're working systematically, you first want to deal with row 1. And you want to make sure you have a 1 here. So how am I going to make sure I get a 1 up here? Huh? Divide by 3. So our first row operation is we're going to take row 1 divided by 3. Yes.
The one that we did before, we started by doing the 0
Okay, well, okay, good question. The reason we did the 0 first on that one is because there was already a 1 up here. So I started us off with an easier one. So since there was already a 1 up here, we could start off by trying to make this 0. But since this isn't a 1 in our new problem, we have to handle that. So the first thing we do is we get a 1 here. Now, as I said, this is going to give us a fraction to deal with. We're going to leave row 2 alone for right now. And then carefully work with taking row 1 and dividing it by 3. So this one turns into a 1. We're going to leave this as an improper fraction. It's 4/3. And the other one is 13/3. Okay. And this is starting to get into why using row operations isn't always the most efficient way of doing it, but we're going to learn them. Yes?
Why did you start with the 1 this time?
We started with the 1 this time because once you have a 1 here, it makes getting a 0 here more easy. Because we're going to then we'll work on the 0. The way that we're going to work it is you work it from the upper left, and then you start, get your 1 in there, and then we start working our way down to start getting zeros and things like that. So we start with the upper left. Then we're going to work on this one to get a 0. So we have to figure out what we can do. We have our row 1 is taken care of. 13/3. That's a 13. And we need to do something to get a 0 here. So does anybody have any ideas? What can I do?
Times -2.
So row 1 times -2. And then plus row 2. So I'm just going to put a little work to the side here just because this is, the first one's easy because -2 times 1 is -2 plus 2. And that's the whole reason we picked that in the first place. So this one's 0. But we need to do -2 times 4/3 plus -3. Because we have to add these things. So this is -8/3 plus -3. If you want, you can go ahead and just do the calculator on that, and it should be -17/3. Ian? Well, the reason we do row 1 is because since this is a nice convenient 1, it makes it easy for us to figure out what you need to multiply it by. So yeah, that's why. Okay, Jason? Never mind. Okay, probably same question. All right, so we've got this one. And I'll just pick another color so that if you're trying to figure out what we're doing, we're taking -2 times 13/3 plus -14. So this is -26/3 plus 14. Okay. We can do this just to, yeah, so we can do that. You can do this, but just in case, -26/3 plus 14 plus -14. Ooh, if I don't do this carefully, I'm going to have a mess. Plus -14. All right. Fraction. -68/3. What is it?
I said, how did you get -17/3?
Here? Here? Because -8/3 plus -3. Okay, I'm going to write this one down and then I'll get back to that question in a second. So this one would be -68/3. All right, and some people are good with the mental math, and that's where that one came from. But just in case, negative 8/3. Okay, and I'm sure there's somebody that needs to see that, plus negative 3. And then we'll change it into a fraction. Negative 17/3. All right, so we have to do something now because we need to make this into a what? Into a 1. So how do you suppose we're going to make that one into a 1? Trying to get this red one into a 1. What's that? Because in echelon form we get 1s down the corner, and the reason that the 1s down the corner are important because that's going to give you y equals, because 0, and we're trying to get a 1 down those edges. So any ideas on what we can do to this? Yes?
To get a echelon form,
Mm-hmm.
we can multiply row 2 times negative 3 over 17.
Beautiful. So negative 3 over 17, go by reciprocals, times R2. So this times 0 is nice. Negative 3/17 times 17/3, that gives you a 1, which is great. So really the only thing we need to think about is the negative 68/3 times negative 3/17. We know it's going to be positive. We know that these are going to cancel out. So really all you're looking for is to see what 68 divided by 17 is going to be. 4. Somebody said 4, which it is. Okay, negative times negative makes positive. So here we are. We have two equations that come out of this. This one is 1x plus 4/3 y equals 13/3. And the bottom equation is how many x?
No x
No x.
equals
Y equals 4. So we have y equals 4. And then you can plug it in to find your other one.
16/3 equals 13.
So sure, he said 16/3, and you get that by plugging this in.
X is -1.
Equals 13/3. And just to slow that down a little bit for those that need it a little bit slower, plus 16/3 equals 13/3. Take away your 16/3, which gives negative 3 over 3, which gives us negative 1. So your ordered pair is negative 1, 4. So once again, this is echelon form that we're looking for to get 1s down the corners and a 0 down in this corner. Okay, so you're looking for 1s in the diagonal. So when you have an equations with two variables, it really, it might be easier to do it in a different way, but we are trying to nail down these row operations for you. And as you can see on the next one, okay, I saw a couple of you actually looking to see the next one, and you see it's a 3x3. Or a 3x4 it'll turn out to be. So we will have quite a lot of steps on here. I'm hoping that I have enough room on my... There will be something that you have to do, yes. You do have to show that you can do row operations. I may not necessarily give you a 3x4, but we want to do this robustly. And we do have to be careful. Jason, yes? There is a way to like shortcut run right over it, but then that doesn't show that you know what row operations are. So, yes.
What number is this?
Let's get that taken care of. On the copy, there's a little bit of there's a big giant smear that came out. So let's take a look. Here it is nice and clean. This is the one that was on there, right? That I gave you.
Is that 3?
that is a 3. Let me double check on the PowerPoint because we don't want to do all that work and then find out that it was wrong. So we want it back. Oh wait, this is the wrong one. This is Algebra 2. We want Algebra 3. Here we go. As you know, after school help is available on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It is a 3, yeah. All right, so let's go through. Let's do through another one. Okay. It is going to take time. Yes, this is a 3. Just so that we know, let's set it up in as a matrix. So we start with that. Oops. Okay. It does take some thought. It takes a little getting used to, but you're going to be okay. So 1. Okay. And we're going to very carefully, because as I said, one mistake just makes a complete mess. And this is 3, 3, -1, 10. Actually, it is a good, comfortable 71 in here, which is about right. So it's appropriate for the rest of the place because the 76 yesterday we were dying. And I'm very glad because there's a thermometer on the clock. It's like hiding. So that's good. So then that way I'm not using my opinion when I put in requests. I'm actually giving numbers and saying, this is our temperature. Can we adjust it so that we're not so terribly hot? All right, here we go. We already have a 1 up here because we're trying to get 1s down the diagonal and we're trying to get 0s over in these 3 spots for echelon form. So we already have a 1 here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start next to work on 0s. Okay, so let's, if we want to get a 0 in row 2 on the left-hand side, how are we going to do that? We're going to leave row 1 alone. We're going to leave row 1 alone. And we're going to leave row 3 alone temporarily because we're just going to work systematically.
Where do we want a 0?
We're going to try to get a 0 right here in row 2.
But afterwards, will we need to have a 0 at the... So do we multiply by 0?
Here. So our goal, okay, here's our goal. Our goal is to get a 0 here and here and here. And our goal is to get a 1 here and here and here. That will be our definition of echelon form. So our first goal, we have a 1 here. So our next goal is actually to get a 0 here. So can't multiply by 0 because that wipes out the whole row. That's like the only thing we can't multiply by. Well, we get a 0, but we have to do it by multiplying by a non-zero times one of the rows and then adding it to another row. So if I want it, I'm going to use row 1 for this. But if I use row 1 and I want to get a 0 here, I'm going to take how many times row 1? -3, because -3 times row 1, and you're just starting off just by looking at these two numbers. -3 times row 1 would give you plus row 2 will give you a 0. Can somebody explain why we did -3? Because that's right, because it'll cancel out. You're going to get 0. Okay, not -3 times 3. Okay, let's hold up. Yep. All right, everybody, let's backtrack a little bit. Just look at these two numbers to start with. Okay, this one's row 1, this one's row 2. So we're just going to look at these two numbers. So if you need to take this one plus this one, and to get a 0, you would have to multiply -3 times this one. Because -3 times 1, this is why we like the 1s. Because -3 times 1 gives you -3, and when you put it together with this one, you get 0. The other ones, but you can't do it just one piece, you have to do the whole row. So once you figure out what's happening with the one piece, we apply it to the whole row.
So then 3.
Why is it negative 3? Because when I do, let's do them one piece at a time. Negative 3 times 1 from here plus row 2 plus 3 gives you 0. The first number in row 1, and then the second number in row 1, and then the third number in row 1. Let's do the second one.
Oh my gosh. So would the second number in row 2 be
Negative 3, let's do it one step, times negative 1, because we're doing negative 3 times this one from row 1, plus
4, 7?
3,
Right? 7?
plus negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, plus 3 gives you 6.
Oh my gosh, I'm failing this.
All right.
It's going to be one question, right?
We couldn't have a ton of these on. So negative 3 times
Negative 15
5
plus 3. Oh, negative 1.
plus negative 1.
Whoa.
Negative 14. 14.
Okay.
Negative 14.
I thought it was.
Negative 3 times row 1 plus row 2. Here's negative 3 times row 1. So negative 16. Negative 15 plus negative 1 is negative 16. And the really good thing is that when you need to go back and look over it, you can pause me as many times as you want. Okay, so here we go. So then this last one, negative 3 times negative 6 plus 10. Because negative 3 times row 1 plus row 2. So negative 3 times row 1 plus row 2. Because right back from the very beginning, you're trying to get a 0 here. So whatever you did to get a 0 here, you have to apply it to the whole row. You can't just do it one piece. You have to do the whole row with the same thing. All right, so next thing we need to do is we need to then make it so that we end up getting a 0 in this spot. So we're going to keep row 1 alone, leave it alone. We're trying to get 0s and 1s so that, just like in the last one, we're going to get 1z equals something at the end. So we are getting this through.
Alright, so now we're trying to get the 1 in that row to be.
Now we're trying to get a 1 here. So we're going to see what can we do to first row to combine with the third row this time. So negative 1. Somebody said negative 1. Good. So we're going to take negative 1 times row 1. This is going to be a little easier. Plus,
Row 2 and
plus, not row 2, just plus row 3. Yeah. So it starts to come after a while. So negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, and negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Negative 1 times 1 plus this 1 is 0. So let's do the next one. Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1 plus 3 is 4. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5 plus 2, negative 3. Let's double check that one because I was hearing both numbers and I don't want to get confused and have something incorrect. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 1 plus 2 is negative 3. Negative 1 times negative 6 is 6 plus 5 is 11. Okay. Okay, hold on. Question. What's that? Where the 4 came from? Negative 1 times negative 1 is 1 plus 3 gives you 4 because it's row times row 1. All right, now we're getting there. Here we go. We have our 1 here. We're really close to getting our 1 here. Okay, we're going to leave row 1 alone because it already is fine. It already has a 1 up here.
Multiply by 6.
Not multiply by 6. Not my negative 6.
Multiply the first row by 6, right? And then
If
trying to get a 1.
I'm trying to get a 1 here, so I don't multiply by 6.
Would be by 5.
Okay, listen up, guys. Listen. By multiplying or dividing, I want to get a 1 here. So if I do negative 5 times 6, I'm going to get negative 30. Not plus.
No, look. You multiplied negative 1 by 5. So you multiply row 1
Oh,
by 5.
too much. All we need to do, guys, pay attention. Shh, 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 shh. We don't need to do
Divide by 6.
we don't need to do anything with 2 rows this time because all I'm trying to do is change this one into a 1. So since I'm trying to change this one into a 1 and this is already a 0, all I have to do is take this and divide it by how much?
6.
Divided by 6.
16 divided by 6.
So if I take row 2 and I divide it by 6, how much is 0 divided by 6? How much is 6 divided by 6? Because we're taking everything in this row and dividing it by 6. 0 by 6 is 0. 6 divided by 6 is 1. Negative 16 divided by 6, if we reduce that, is negative 8 over 3. And then 28 divided by 6, when we reduce that, 14 over 3. Yep. All right. I know that this is a long road, guys, but stay with me. And if we run out of time, we run out of time. I think we're going to be okay. Yes. I'm not sure where that is. Okay. So
Divided by negative 3.
here's the thing. Now we need to work on. Ignore the first row, and we have 1 in the second row where it belongs. And what we're trying to do is we need to get another 0. We need to get a 0 where the 4 is. So in order to get a 0 where the 4 is, we are going to have to deal with these fractions in row 2. And this is 14, right?
Yeah.
14 over 3. And so is anybody seeing what can I do to row 2 to make it turn this into a 0?
Times negative 4. Negative 4.
By negative 4.
Row 2.
If I take negative 4 times row 2 and add it to row 3, I'm going to get a 0 because I'm looking for a 0 here. Row 2 plus row 3. So, okay, so these are getting easier though because negative 4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 plus 4 gives 0. So here's our tricky one.
Negative 20 over 3.
Negative 4 times negative 8/3 plus what? Plus negative 3. So this would be 32 over 3 minus 9 over 3.
Yeah. So 23 over 3. Negative
23 over 3 is our answer, yeah. 23 over 3.
14 over 3.
And then 14 over 3. So negative 4 times 14 over 3. Okay, just stick with me for a minute.
35 over 3.
Negative 4 times 14 over 3 plus 11.
35 over 3.
So let's resort to a calculator for this just to make sure, because we're getting into some really hairy things. Negative 4 times 14 over 3 and then plus 11.
So what's the purpose of this? Like, this already all the numbers are in there. Like, I don't get why we have to get zeros.
Okay, if you're not understanding why we're getting 0, 0 yet, negative 23 over 3, when we get to the final thing, and you'll see it in echelon form, then we'll be able to see why that was important. So let's just hold on. Nope, because what do we need to have here? A 1. Okay, so we need to have a 1 there. So I want to get this back.
Miss Doughty, I don't. What do you mean? Like you gotta get 0, 0, 1, 1, like.
Like, why do I have to get a zero?
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If I answered that question right now because we're one step away from where it'll make sense, you're not going to understand it. So let's finish it off, and then that will make sense to you. So if I want to make this one into a 1, I need to multiply it by how much? If this is 23 thirds, I multiply that by what to make a 1?
Negative 20, 3 over 23.
Just
3 over 23.
3 over 23. So we're going to take 3 over 23 times row 3.
Wait, 3 over 23 times 3?
Yes, because 0 times anything is 0. 0 times anything is 0. 23 over 3 times 3 over 23 gives us 1.
And then negative 23.
Negative 23 over 3 times 3 23rds gives us
Negative 1?
negative 1. All right, now it's in echelon form. 1's down here, and now I can answer the question. You're like, why are we doing this? Okay, and just if we can hold off for a minute, we can analyze this. Now, we have our answers through X, Y, Z columns. X column, Y column, Z column. So this final answer right here, 0x plus 0y plus 1z equals negative 1. Here's why we did echelon form, because this one gives us z is just right here in front of us. In order to find y, this row gives us 1y, 0x, 1y, minus 8 thirds z equals 14 thirds. Because it's 0. 0x's, 1y's, negative 8 thirds z equals 14 thirds. Since we know how much z is,
Why is Z negative 1?
because 0x plus 0y plus 1z equals negative 1. Then we're going to plug in our negative 1 equals 14 thirds. So plus 8 thirds, how much is 14 minus 8 thirds? 14 minus 8 is 6 thirds.
Wait. Wouldn't it, when if it's negative on the left side, from the equal sign, when it goes over to 14 thirds, wouldn't it be positive?
Hold on, but it's minus negative. I need more space. I'm going to do a nice big erase here. Here we go. I'm just going to bring this up here because we need more space. Here we go. So if we finish this off, we do, yes, y plus 8 thirds equals 14 thirds. And then when we take away 8 thirds from both sides, we get 6 thirds, which is 2. So our second answer is y equals 2. And then our third answer that we aren't going to get a chance to finish off today, but our third answer will be what you get when you plug in the last bit Okay, if the bell rings, just sit tight for a minute. I want to pull this up to where our last answer comes from. Here we go. Here it is. Our very last one, when you plug it in, x minus y plus 5z, you plug in the other numbers that you got, and you get x equals 1, just so we can finish off the problem. X minus y plus 5z, that's this one, equals -6. We found our y, we found our z, and you plug it in and we get regular 1. And your ordered pair is 1, 2, -1. And that's that.